If your main goal is to build lots of muscle and look massive, I still think that pursuing strength training makes a lot of sense. Let me explain why right now. So the first thing I'll say is that progressive overload is absolutely key. I don't care how much you focus on mind muscle connection, TUT, and optimal volume. If progression is not taking place over time, you'll likely not grow. This is what has been consistent with the literature and history. You're probably not the exception unless you're taking a bunch of drugs while having the greatest of genetics. Fact is, there needs to be some objective metric to know that we're actually making progress, not just spinning our wheels, which is all too common nowadays. And in the case of strength training, we're always maximizing that because it's solely number-based. Nothing else matters in this case. But the thing is, the side effect is improved hypertrophy because you can't separate size and strength, even though a lot of marketers will tell you otherwise. Allow me to simplify it like this. If your numbers are going down, you're probably losing muscle mass. If your numbers are maintaining, you're probably not gaining any additional size. And if they're improving, say taking your bench from 185 to 275, you probably gain a good amount of size. And the thing is, it doesn't matter what we're feeling, nor does the mirror make a difference in this case, because we already know that building muscle as a natural is a slow process. Look at those muscle gaining calculators. Every year, it gets slower and slower. So it's not like every 2 months you're gonna say, oh my God, I gained 0.5 inches on my biceps. I mean, it could happen, but after a certain point, that progression is slowed down. The visual progression is what I'm talking about here, whereas strength can still occur far more rapidly depending what exercise you're performing. And you know that if you're not going backwards, that hypertrophy is occurring to a certain extent, even though there is a ratio aspect here. Yes, with strength training, you will gain a bit more performance relative to your size. That makes a lot of sense given the specificity of training, which I'm gonna talk about later, in addition to the percentages and what we do within the program itself. But regardless of all that, the fact is, our numbers are not going down, they're going up. And that's what makes a difference long-term, motivation-wise, since the gains are so freaking slow, and size-wise. You can't tell me that a guy who improves his numbers by a significant margin is not going to look bigger. It can't happen. It won't happen. Everybody scatters weight differently, and there is genetics to consider, but still, if I take your strict curl from 95 pounds to 135 pounds, you don't have to second guess. You don't have to pull out the measuring tape. The objective numbers prove to you that you gain muscle. And that's all I'm trying to say. If you want to simplify everything, which a lot of guys are into nowadays, a lot of guys are fed up of the headaches, of the complicated explanations behind a lot of training protocols. Hence the training advice of train harder than last time. Well, guess what? Strength training is super simple too. Either your numbers are going up or they're not. That's how you assess your progress. And you know that you're gaining size because progressive overload, whether it's evidence of hypertrophy or the actual driver itself, doesn't matter. We gotta induce it to a certain extent. And what I could also say about that, particularly for advanced lifters, is that you will never, let me say this very clearly, you will never maximize your strength without maximizing your size. A bigger muscle has more strength potential. And that's often what you're limited by at the end. When you're benching in the high threes, trying to get to that 4 plates, it's not increasing your frequency to 4 times a week or doing more of the regular benching, which has been the foundation for all these years that's going to get you to that 4 or 5. I mean, it could, but what you probably should do is focusing more on developing the chest, shoulders, and triceps to their full capacity, up that volume. And this is why concurrent periodization is so valuable, because we get to focus on all the performance elements simultaneously, maximizing our size in addition to the specific elements of the 1 rep max and the high percentages in general. But I digress. Once you know what your weaknesses are in hypertrophy, then a strength increase is going to occur. And that correlation itself makes strength training a valuable tool because we know that we're always getting bigger. Just the process itself ensures that. That's why I love the idea of objective training, because sometimes guys will say, wow, look at all these gains that I made, yet the numbers don't reflect that. And then when you actually do a proper analysis, side-by-side comparison photos in the same lighting with the same pump and all that, you often don't see the gains. Whereas a guy who really gets strong, you take that dude from a 315 squat to a 500 squat and you look at some before and after pics, there's going to be a massive increase in leg size. Heck, you take that guy from advanced to elite, you're going to see noticeable improvements because, like I said before, you start to get plateaus at that level. Now you really got to dial in on that program. And it's that individual focus that'll really maximize your size, even though the goal is to maximize your strength. Crazy, but that's how it works. And if you have any questions about this, let me know because I can clarify in further details. So anyway, another point I want to stress is that with strength training, You're always focusing on the fundamentals, the exercise that have stood the test of time for the most part. The squat, bench press, deadlift, barbell row, overhead press, weighted pull-up, weighted dip, the big heavy compounds, the barbell curls as well, your barbell extension. It's classic stuff that can be done with straight weight and dumbbells, and then the variations that those entail, whether it be by changing the angles, like doing an incline bench or a floor press, or even modifying the strength curve, like including pins or adding bands or chains in. Regardless, they're all exercises that work and will absolutely not fail you. It's not something that you just created at the top of your head. It's not some gimmicky movement that some marketer is trying to sell you. Even though all you really gotta do is get stronger, up that volume, and ensure that those sets are being taken close to failure. I don't care what little tweak you do to your form. If you're not straining hard enough, you'll likely not maximize size results. Now that said, my argument is not that these new movements are bad. In fact, some of them are quite genius and I would absolutely recommend them. Rather, it's all about simplifying the process. And we know that the basics work, so why not just rely on that? Because some guys will tell you that the basics don't work, that you're wasting your time, that this is a better way. And that advice might have good intentions in some cases, but it often confuses lifters and leads them down a path where they're really not growing at all because they're not getting stronger at the fundamentals. A lot of guys don't have a foundation, and if they do, they're wasting their time on movements that are far less efficient or exercise that haven't quite stood the test of time yet. Of course, we all get to that point. Eventually, it'll happen where we know that, yeah, this really works. But my point is that you shouldn't try to reinvent the wheel unless what you're promoting is really, really good. Makes a lot of sense from an exercise science standpoint. Like, you can give rational arguments behind what you're saying, not, oh, you feel it a little bit more and that's what's going to make the difference. Look at the mind-muscle connection. Like, give a proper argument. Let's talk about the strength curve. Let's talk about the joint angles. Let's talk about injury prevention. Let's dive into the specifics here. If you can do that, then it's probably a good movement. But regardless of all that, right? Like, you know, I do some unconventional lifts too, right? Regardless, my argument is the basics work and they won't fail you, all right? And strength training is all about that. Because let's keep it real, there's only so many ways that you can curl or press. And I would argue that the main benefit you get from the variation is the fact that we're minimizing overuse, not developing superior size, or that you're accelerating the process that much more, or that this is better than the standard form, because that's usually not the case. So strength training keeps you accountable. You're not just a gullible guy who's subscribing to magical exercises. You know what the real deal is. And I think that's very important, to be realistic. This way, our motivation stays high in the long run. We're never getting disappointed, and we're just enjoying that freaking process. We know that if our numbers are going up, you take that progression from 10-8-8 to 10-10-10, then you're up 5 pounds. The classics. We know that if you do that, it's all good. So anyway, those are the major points I want to touch upon. One final thing I could say is that volume is always going to be accounted for. So no matter what camp you're in, whether it's linear or concurrent conjugate, you're all good. Every variable has been factored in. The percentages, the exact weight that you're going to be using in some cases, the waving system itself. And I think a lot of guys need that because a lot of lifters don't know what to do. And I think that following a structured routine that's been systematically designed to improve your performance makes a lot of sense. Because at the end of the day, what allows us to remain consistent and maximize progressive overload is always going to be a great option. These routines have a lot of thought put into them and they work for some of the best athletes in the world. I'd much rather you run something like that compared to a program that was written by some gym bro who's probably taking a bunch of roids as well. Not saying these athletes don't use, but let's keep it real. When it comes to bodybuilding, it makes a lot more of a difference when getting massive. Because these dudes just up the dose, they use the highest volume of which they can handle, they run a basic bro split and they fluff and pump it and they just get massive. And when real naturals try to train like that, they often experience all kinds of plateaus. And I feel that just by running a structured strength training routine where the volume has already been accounted for and all the right movements and everything that I talked about in today's video, I think that that makes so much more sense. It'll really simplify the entire process. All these headaches, all these debates that you see in YouTube Fitness, man, it'll no longer faze you. Now it's just objective progress. You're either getting better performance-wise or you're not. And if you ain't, you gotta ask why, and that's when we dial things in further. You become a much smarter lifter in this way. Always be in control and actually being able to pinpoint what got you the gains. Not just, oh, I think this is what happened, or I felt that this is what happened. You know, you can look at those papers, you can look at those workout logs, you see it. And now you can use that knowledge to help other people. Or if you ever have some setbacks in life, you'll know how to rebuild the proper way, and you save a lot of time doing this. And you know what? We're committed to this. We're going to be in this game for life. So we might as well do it right instead of just spinning our wheels all the time, which I'm not in favor of. So that said, guys, that's why I think strength training makes a lot of sense for just building muscle in general. It's a great route, time proven, there's so many benefits. Now I want to know from you, what are your reasons for pursuing this path? Let's see in the comments section, and I'll talk to you all next time.